Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are back with more autobiography of a freedom writer. And we'll be starting chapter 8 called Disillusioned. So let's go ahead and just hop into this. I never wanted to sever ties with my friends and family. However, both my mother and father were saying that I should leave, and there was one particular event that played a major role in them trying to push me out the door. As I mentioned earlier, my dad had a Caucasian friend in Silver Creek, Mississippi, who was privy to major local Klan discussions in Silver Creek, Mississippi. Who was okay? He notified us that the Klan had determined my identity when Dad came to me and said that it was time for me to leave Mississippi. Now he knew nothing, or he knew what he was saying. My cover was blown. The Klan now knew who I was, and the threats had begun. Threatening telephone calls in the middle of the night to my parents were not something I took lightly. It was a sad thing to have to watch my mother deal with them. It was because of my actions that my parents had to endure such hatefulness. Therefore, after a few short, tearful conversations with a couple of close friends, I decided to leave Mississippi, even though I was just one semester shy of college graduation. It was January 1962, and I only informed two friends of my destination, Kansas City, Missouri. My family and I had decided that I would first go to Kansas City because the White Citizens Council would not expect me to go there. I purposely indicated to most people that I was destined for Chicago because that is where I wanted the Klan to think I was going. Two of my half sisters lived in Kansas City, so I lived with one of them. On several occasions, two white men unknown to us appeared at my door asking if Thomas Armstrong lived there. The answer was, "Who?" Still, they persisted. I had no way of knowing that the long arm of the Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission, name unknown at that time, would reach all the way to Kansas City. In Missouri, I was no longer with my known community of activists. I was no longer with very close friends. I was not satisfied with the new group. I located the Kansas City chapter of CORE and began hanging out with them. Uh, their movement was dull. I left them after a couple of months. I could not go home. My whole world changed. Depression set in. I began my stay in Kansas City by living with my sister, Kathleen. She was a nurse at the University of Kansas Hospital. My husband, or her husband, Marcus Tucker, was an entrepreneur. He was also a high ranking member of the Prince Hall Masons. My other brother in law, Neville Mitchell, was working at Fred Harvey Restaurant and asked me to work there as a fry cook. A cousin of my brother in law, Joseph, also worked there. I took the job and rented a bedroom in the home of an elderly couple located 2 blocks from my sister on Benton Boulevard. The landlord's son was a rail post office clerk with the United States Postal Service. He worked Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Those were the kind of hours that I liked. Little did I know that several years later I would have a similar job. At night, I would often wake up in a cold sweat, screaming, and the kind owner of the home would try to calm me. On one such occasion, I was dreaming that a hand was caressing my chest. I felt the hand and decided that it was the hand of a friend of mine. I touched her hair only to realize it was too thick to be hers. I panicked. A group of people began kicking, beating, and cutting me, and there was a long gash across my chest. Frantically, I tried to get away. At that point, I awakened and scrambled quickly out of the room. Luckily, I still had on my pajamas. The owner of the house had company, and there I stood in the middle of their group, bleeding and frightened to death. There was skin under my fingernails. In my sleep, I had scratched that hand across my own chest. Both of my brothers-in-laws were heavy drinkers, and I sank farther into depression. The temptation to consume alcohol was too great. I began frequenting the bars around 19th and Vine Streets. This was the worst part of the city. At that point, I was in a bottomless pit of nothing and was well on my way to becoming a functioning alcoholic. The streets were filled with drunks, and each night fights broke out. I could feel that things were not right. A part of me knew I needed to leave before I was embedded too deep. The night after leaving a bar, I was walking along the sidewalk with another person from the street. That person struck me with some object. Lucky for me, I was next to a boarded up street level window. I fell against it and into the window well of an abandoned building. There was no pain. I pretended to be dead. The guide was afraid to go down the darkened steps into the lower level and soon left the scene. A few weeks later, I was walking home around 1 a.m., intoxicated. I was surrounded by a group of guys who said they wanted to sell a pistol. I demanded to see it. I quickly noticed there was only one bullet in the revolver. I pointed it in the air and pulled the trigger. I was immediately struck in the head, robbed, and thrown in the bushes out of sight. The robbery did bother me. However, what bothered me more was the fact that those young black men were now going to have a police record that would follow them for the rest of their lives. I would later discover that 2 of those lives were not long ones. One young man was killed at about the age of 23, and the other one died when he was near 30 years old of a then unknown disease to be later recognized as AIDS. Shortly after arriving in Kansas City, I met Regina Pitchland. Knowing her was good for me. She had a lot to do with my beginning the long, lonely ascent out of the gutter. I fell in love with Regina. She had 2 wonderful and beautiful children. They reminded me of how my birth father married my birth mother and was an instant father of 7 children before having me. All 7 of them grew to love him dearly. While working the evening shift at Fred Harvey's restaurant, I would get home late at night, very tired. Trying to impose some structure on myself, I wanted to get up no later than 3 a.m. in the morning, or 8 a.m. in the morning. As Regina left for work, she would board the 7:30 a.m. bus 1/2 block from where I lived. Often she would walk that 1/2 block and awaken me. She was such an angel. It was a wonder that she didn't have wings. Regina was responsible for the little sanity I had left while living in Kansas City. I came close to asking her to marry me, but I was afraid that I might not be the kind of father that her 2 children needed. I knew that in my condition as an alcoholic, those children would be better off if their mother raised them as a single parent than with me around. Regina was a brave and beautiful young lady, and she would have no trouble finding someone more fit than I was to be a father. Once I made that determination, I knew that it was now time for me to make a difficult decision. I had to get out of her life, and I had to do it quick. But yeah, we'll go ahead and end this episode here. So yeah, there was threats around, um, because of his activities, and he was even doing nonviolent activities to protest. There was still threats against him, uh, seeking to hurt, to maim, to kill. You know, if you really want to know how bad it was, yeah, it was bad. Just, because people are asking for the right to be treated as equals, their lives can be considered forfeit by those who don't like this other race. Even though they were doing it peacefully. Yeah, it's ridiculous. He moves to Kansas City, lives with a sister, and then finally gets a job as a fry cook. Um, but yeah, the name of the chapter was Disillusioned. As you can tell, he's struggling. So yeah, but that's going to be everything. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.